Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of Lost Through the Rabbit Hole. I'm your host, Josh Myota. Tonight's guest is Hot Jane Contactee. That's who we had last week, and we're going to pick up right where we left off.
Well, hey, thank you for having me, Josh, and it's an honor to be here. And I'm going to do the best I can, and we're going to get through this, psychic attacks or no psychic attacks. So anyway, just want to start where I left off. Actually, I'm going to kind of mix it up a little bit. I wanted to get back to the soul transference memory. I didn't talk about what it was like before I had this whole super soldier stuff come out, and the whole SSP, the MILAB stuff, more or less. And so I'm just going to go into that, and we'll just go from there and see where we go with it. So this is the first memory that I seem to have had during, my childhood. It's I can't pinpoint where it, where the memory came through, where it manifested itself at. I do know that in my late teens, I started getting flashbacks. They're in consecutive order. They're actually in perfect chronological order with the events that took place. So things that I had forgotten from my younger years, I was able to remember, and then there was some added to it. The context of this memory is it looks like I'm in a room or some kind of a room, and it's all white light. I can't see exactly what's around me. I know there's people there and there's objects, but I can't tell what they are. And this was done probably to make me think that I was in a heavenly realm. The other thing that I think I mentioned last time was that the ETs in this memory have like their faces shaded, or they have like rectangles, like a rectangle over their eyes, or a square or something like that. It was made to be obvious that it was that the memory was edited. Some other things that were odd in the memory is that we were speaking English, but we were speaking telepathically. There was no verbal communication, but it was English. And I thought that, maybe this was edited, or maybe that when you communicate telepathically, that you hear things, it automatically translates, and it does, but it didn't seem right. And it just seemed weird. And I could tell that somebody had fully edited this. This was something that was implanted in me, but I knew that it was real. And over the course of the contact that I had, which started in 2000, it started the end of 2005, but it really started to pick up and became like a two-way conversation telepathically in 2006. And I was given a complete bogus story of myself, this ET history. Now there's ET history in me, but this wasn't accurate. And they tied it in with the soul transference memory, because this is the first thing that I asked the ETs that I was in contact with is, what happened? What is that? And I had a list of things, it was like the normal questions, is the Loch Ness Monster real? Who is Bigfoot? Is it real? And stuff like that. The same thing, Josh would ask if you had an opportunity to sit down with an ET or anybody else who's, looked into this stuff. So anyway, let's get into the memory. Now, as I had the flashbacks, what happened was the room started to clear up, so I could see things a little clearer, maybe about half as clear. But when I did the hypnotic regression with James Rink, I got a chance to see the room total clarity. I mean, it was completely clear, but just from one vantage point. I didn't see it from the other side of the room, but I saw everything that I needed to see. And so I walk into this room and I'm standing in a lab, and it feels like a medical setting, but in the memory, I can't see anything. It's very foggy, but sort of vague, but then I can pick things out. I know there was a computer screen on the left-hand side of the room up on the wall. There was a row of cabinets next to it. And then, below that was like a desk that went all the way across the wall. And there was a chair there of some kind. And then there was some other stuff in the room, like a table to the right. And this is kind of coming from the hypnosis session too, because I didn't see that part. I didn't see there was an object there, but there was there was some kind of technological object sitting all around, and, like on the counter, on the table. And then in the middle was this big, machine that looked like kind of like an MRI machine, but it was different. You didn't go inside it. It had a large, looked like plastic white, housing. It was about probably 8 to 9 feet tall, maybe 7 or 8 feet long, and 5, 6, 7 feet wide. And then on it, was a place to lay. And then it had like a cover that came down, was hinged. And I spoke about that the last time. So what happened was, is I'm in there and there's 3 people in the room. I know that that their name was, or, what they did was actually, they described herself as a life engineer. So this was afterward. I found that out. But these were the 3 life engineers that I had had all these problems with. They were Draco reptilians, but in this case, they looked like human ETs. And in the beginning, I thought they were angels because, like I said, it was like a fog around the room. So I'm standing there, and there's a guy, there's a male. He's at the computer terminal that's in the left-hand side of the room, and there's a woman who was standing around, and there's another person standing. I think it was another male, but he was in the room itself, not in front of me. And that's the way these memories are. You can't. It's like any memory you have. It's like you don't see it clearly in your head, and it's just the way your mind kind of stores things. So anyway, the first thing he asked me, he says, "What race do you want to be?" I noticed that I was pretty stressed out about it. I was worried about what they were going to do. And the context of this is that I was actually leaving my physical body container, and I was going into the one that I'm in right now. That's what the ETs told me after the fact. The reality was I was in a super soldier program. They were fracturing my soul. They were going to put it into my mother, who was the surrogate, to have me. It's kind of like maintaining a culture, like a test tube. So you have this individual that you put into society, who's a soul fragment of a soul line that you're constantly fragmenting and making all of these super soldiers out of, or whatever they're using you for. So it's a way, I guess, to preserve you. So that's what it was. So I was worried about what they were going to do with me, and I had this recollection of this friend. And I would assume this guy was in the super soldier program. He had to have been. I thought he was an extraterrestrial. He looked Hajian. This is the funny thing here, because in this memory, I thought that I was Hajian. And the reason is because they're almost 8 feet tall. So the other people in the room are the same height as me. And I didn't put all this together until much, much later, just in the last couple of months. Some things I did, some things I didn't. But it was just weird. So anyway, I was nervous and I was worried about what was going to happen. And I thought about this person, and I could see him in total clarity. I could see him as he was here on Earth, and he was in a wheelchair. He looked like Stephen Hawking a bit. I mean, he was completely, decrepit and just inside a wheelchair, sitting in it. And I saw him on the streets. It would look like inner city Chicago. It was large, like structures all around these, and it was a family. It was him, it was his mother, and there was a couple of kids, and she was behind the wheelchair, and they're all actually walking together up a sidewalk, and it looked like a really big city. I've only been to Chicago one time, but for some reason it seems like it was maybe Chicago, but it could have been New York City, it could have been Washington, it could have been any number of any big city around the United States. And I saw what he was going through, and I thought about how much of a friend he was, and I could see him, like as he was, as I knew him, and he looked like a really young guy. I thought he looked almost Asian in a sense because of his skin tone. So I really wasn't sure, because for years I thought maybe this guy was Asian, but I don't know. He's obviously a Hajian, and I didn't know what Hajians were. And so I started to get like nervous, and I was complaining in my mind to the staff in the room that I don't want to be handicapped. I don't want to go through what he went through. I was worried about him taking my eyesight. And I was worried about that because I knew the context of it was, because this is like a piece of memory. So you don't know the bigger context, the smaller context, a piece of the context. I knew that I was going to be put into a compromising lifetime, or at least a piece of me was. I didn't understand that part of it until, the last couple of months, and this information came out. So I'm kind of protesting here. And so anyway, this one woman who I knew to be, her name was Asib. She was one of these life engineers that I had a lot of problems with. This was a very sick, sadistic person. because of what they did to me. Their job was to give us engineered lifetimes that were miserable. Um, and mine didn't start necessarily that way, but I had health problems to begin with. So things got worse as I started to wake up. So my lifetime was worse than it actually may have been if I didn't wake up like this. Because the idea was to keep me asleep and to keep me contained. So I'm like, I'm basically protesting and saying this isn't going to work. And she just looks at me sternly and says, "You're going to have to take a handicap," because what they told me prior to her saying that was that I was going to have a speech impairment. And I said, "What am I going to do?" And I just said to myself, "I guess I'll figure it out when I get there." And that's when, and then right as I was saying that, she looked at me and telepathically said, "You've got to take a handicapped," and very sternly, because there was no give. I was trying to like manipulate the situation. They asked me to get into this machine, and I climbed in it, and the lid came down and it filled up full of light. And well, as it filled up full of light, they were standing to my left. So when I recovered some of this memory in my hypnosis session, the rear of the machine was at the entrance of the room. So the front of the machine where I was laying in it was facing where they had a shelf and all their stuff at. So they were standing where I was standing before I got into the machine, which was to the left of it. So anyway, and I actually, now that I think about it, I actually laid opposite in that machine when I got into it in the memory than I did when I got into it under the hypnosis session. It's kind of weird. It was like I was in an opposite position. I was flipped around. But as I was inside this thing and it filled up full of light, they were talking to me telepathically. They were standing in a group of 3 to my left, and they were telling me something. I don't remember what they said. It was probably, good luck. I don't know. But as it completely filled up full of light, I could see a fetus. And it looked to be, and I know this because when I did anatomy physiology, when I went to community college, the first day that I was in class and I had my textbook, I just remember opening it up and looking at all the stages of from an embryo or, from a zygote to embryo to a fetus and so forth. And I looked and I got right to where it said week 12, the end of the first trimester. And that's exactly what I saw. So I was putting 2 and 2 together there. And this was before my open contact started when I looked that up in the textbook. This was back probably, my late 20s, probably my late 20s, early 30s. Actually, no, it was my late 20s. Contact started in my early 30s. So anyway, that's what happened. And then after that, the very next thing that I remember was just kind of going into like a dream state. So, but where they cut the memory off is right there. But what I didn't know is I thought that they took my body and put it in the storage. And then that was it. And I was in this engineered lifetime, which was supposed to be for therapeutic purposes. And I always felt guilty because they made me feel guilty, telling me that I was here at the expense of humanity. And so were the rest of us. 1/3 of the population, being star seeds, were here for therapeutic engineered lifetimes. And that was the purpose of preventing people from remembering their past lives and hijacking their consciousness, was to keep this augmented reality going so that we could be put here and utilize humanity for therapeutic purposes, like a parasite to a host type of relationship. So that's the soul, that's the whole soul transference memory there. In my last interview, I talked about from that point forward what I found out, which was, the truth and the whole full context of it. So that really changed my life. And it was like the very thing that made me realize that I was different from everybody else. And back then, growing up, there was no internet. I couldn't look these things up. I'd read a lot of books, but there was never anything about this stuff. And I thought I was in heaven. I thought it was a pre-birth memory. So it was a big mystery until they started lying to me and filling in the whole context, which was false. And then I eventually figured out the truth. So fast forward, now we're going to get into the super soldier stuff. So what happened next is, not really happened next, but what happened this spring, because I had a lifetime of like contact and weird stuff. And then I was in that cult that I talked about, which was a MILAB program. And it just kind of went on from there. Well, I got to the point where, they had me making videos and they were sabotaging me. And eventually they tried to discourage me from doing it. And that was the beginning of last year. So what happened is that I started getting attacked by these ETs, and things kept getting worse and worse and worse. My health was in a big decline. They gave me heart failure. They lied to me and actually put me in a situation where they told me they weren't going to let me do this project, that they weren't going to let me be their social implant, or their social influencer, and that I had to go home. And they set this thing up where I was to believe that there was ETs coming through that were here to convince me to go home. So I'm like, well, why am I here? So I said, okay, I'll go home, and I just want you to help me get, closure in my life. And I said, okay. Well, all of a sudden, within, I don't know, 2 weeks or so, I started coming down with heart failure symptoms. I made a video about it and all that, and I went on the Typical Skeptic podcast. I told that story in some of the early podcasts, and so that was the situation. Well, things kept getting worse. I decided I was just going to keep making videos, and that's when the attacks got worse. At this point, I started getting attacked, kind of almost. I mean, it was pretty much nonstop. But in that process, I had went into Project Avalon, and I was told to go in there because I did have some positive ET contact. They were talking to me under some type of an arrangement or like a treaty, and I don't quite understand that, but I know it was like a prisoner of war, or like being a prisoner and having like a visit from someone. So there was a situation like that. So I had several ETs coming in. They were basically trying to talk in code to me and say things that would get me to think. And when I look back, I can see where all that took place. To where they were actually involved in a process under controlled conditions to help me wake up, to realize what was going on, to break me free of this. But at the time, I didn't realize that was taking place. So I get to this point where now I'm being attacked, and it's gotten worse. They put an attachment on my left ankle. My ankle stayed swollen for several months. It's actually still painful now. It's been 7 months later. I still have some rotation issues in it, and I couldn't get these attachments off. So they were really punishing me. So a really good friend of mine that came into my life about 2 years ago, who did some podcasts with me, she came into my life and was here to help me get through this. And she does psychic healings. And I asked her, I said, can you take a look at my ankle? And this was the interesting part. This was like the moment where shit started to hit the fan. I tracked her down. I was like, Colin, I sent her many, many text messages. I finally got a hold of her. She was really tired with work and stuff. And then she finally got back to me like minutes later and says, oh my God, there's an attachment on there. She says, I think I removed it. How do you feel? And I said, I feel a lot better. Well, no, I'm not completely better, but I'm not hurting as bad as I was. I'm still sore, but there's a difference. And then she said, that's not all that I saw. She said, I also saw that you were on a table inside a big government building. There were Dracos around you. They had some type of a injection device that was like mounted to, the table you were laying on. And they had these syringes in your ankle, and they had hoses connected to them. And they were pumping it full of some kind of fluid. And I'm like, really? So, and then I don't know if it was that day. I think it was that day or that evening, but she started sending me these voicemails, and it was one after another. And she's like flipping out. It's like, oh my God. And she's giving me live descriptions of what she's experiencing psychically. She gets this download of like literally this whole entire ET agenda. And what it was is that, she has a very Christian way of looking at things. So, she asked the Holy Spirit, and this is the source consciousness. This is, the collective subconscious that actually has its own personality. It's basically like God, how we perceive it, but a bit different, because we're just thoughts in a never ending story in the mind of the source consciousness. But the source consciousness can actually step in, can actually step in and as like a mediator and put things in order and actually communicate with you, which I never knew. And she kept telling me this, and they would lie to me and tell me that she's in a different ET program, that we're the ones communicating with her, pretending to be God and pretending to be angels and stuff. So they were doing everything that they could to try to discourage us from actually making some progress with what she had come into my life to do, which was to help me. And anyway, she has this incredible download, and it talked about, she talked about everything, and I'm still trying to get her to do a podcast with me. We almost did it last week, just hasn't happened yet, but I'll let you know when it happens, Josh, so you can take a look at it.
Awesome.
And and she may even come on your show. I don't know. I have to get her to, to do this, but she's been going through a lot of health issues herself and stuff, and she's been under attack a bit too. So anyway, she has this complete download, and she sees how they're using the New Age movement to deceive people. How the negative ETs are. She sees how there's this parasitic AI type of system, what I refer to as the planetary consciousness simulation. But I never was aware of the fact, and I never believed that there was some sort of parasitic nature or vampiric nature to it, where they're literally creating human suffering through a type of social engineering, where they what they do is they manipulate world leaders. They have people that they put into, the human form that are ETs that are under like a controlled state of consciousness to create this entire engineered reality that we're in that is just loaded with human suffering. And then these AI entities that they make actually feed off of this energy. So they become like a vampiric parasite. And if you think about it, it's brilliant in a sadistic way. If you were going to create an AI system that has AI entities that are transdimensional, this is just programmed psychic energy that takes a form, has a limited intelligence, has a very limited self-awareness, just carries out a program, an assignment. If you make these things feed off of energy, then you've got a much more efficient system. So she saw all of this. And so I'm totally mind blown at this point, because not only does it sound completely out on, left field and kind of crazy, it totally resonated with me. I knew it was true. And she finished it with a text that said, "I don't think you're going to believe any of this. I think the programming is going to stop you." Something like that. And it didn't. And I said, "I need your help." And so while I was trying to figure out what was going to happen, it was like a day or two went by at this point. I was trying to figure out what to do, and I started to get images and information from my higher self. Now, what was interesting about this is, like, just before, or actually after she had the download, she actually, and maybe it was before or after, but she did a card spread. And normally I never believed in tarot cards before I met her, but there's something to this. I know it's psychic, but there's something else going on, and I can't put my finger on it. But she did a spread, and I probably got it on my cell phone, but it was the craziest thing. It was my female higher self, which was represented by one card, trying to reach me, and then all of these forces trying to prevent me, from actually making that connection. And she goes, "What they're trying to do with you, or what they've succeeded with you," the first thing she said that was crazy, she goes, "There's another version of you out there. I know this sounds crazy." And she was referring to a cloned alter. And she said, "You're the clone." And that to me, it sounds like something out of a science fiction movie, and I couldn't accept it. So I'm like, no, I can't be the clone. But then I realized that, that I had that strange memory. This is before I knew what it was, what I talked about last time with, the people wearing the navy blue, which looked like a bunch of grays that had, completely white skin. All of it started to kind of come and like flood in. And I started to realize, man, I've really been under a spell, because I had no idea that this was going on. And then I realized just how bad this is, because there's so many people that don't know that they've been abducted, but in fact they have. And most people probably go to the grave and never realize it, that this has happened to them, because they're that good at it. They only make the people remember the ones that they feel that are going to be problematic, I think, or the ones they want to use to be social implants to talk about this for social engineering purposes. So anyway, I start to, to like get these images in my head. And it's now from my higher self, and my higher self's actually able to fight through this AI that's because I was loaded with attachments, which I'll explain in a moment, and also etheric implants. So I realized that I have to that I have to cut these silver cords. I have to separate myself from silver cords. And I don't know how this all went down exactly because it's like a train wreck in my head. It's like getting in a car accident and trying to like think about all the events that took place like before you had the accident, after when you're standing outside the wreck. It's like a blur. So I don't know. I don't really remember the accurate order of events here, but I just remember going into Project Avalon. I was this was afterward, but yeah, we just skip that because that's, now that I think about it, that's something that happened afterward. It's how I found James Rink. So I get these images that I got to separate. I got to destroy these cords, and so I went to try it. And before that happened, I started to get contact. Now I'm kind of like jumping around here because I was talking about a friend in Project Avalon. So I apologize if I'm confusing people. When this is back in the spring, he told me that he had been attacked by super soldiers, along with he said I was attacked by super soldiers who were with a Draco. They were like showing up together, and he had to defend himself psychically from these. And we talked about this whole thing. And so I started to do videos back in the spring. And this is what really started the attacks. Because once I started doing that, that was like apparently a red flag for these ETs that, he's really getting on the verge of waking up. And we've got to stop this. So I started getting attacks, and it just kept getting worse. And so I did a couple of interviews. I started talking about this. I put it in video. I talked about the super soldier connection here. And then things got a lot worse for me. And so moving forward here, the next thing that happened is that I went to, because I was having heart failure problems. This is like within 2 to 3 days of this whole thing started, all this information coming out. I'm on my way to the heart doctor. I'm pulling in the office. It's just a visit to get, some tests done in like a month or two. So I go in, and as I'm pulling up to it, I get a telepathic communication from a Draco. And this guy had this really calm demeanor, very smooth, very articulate. And I call him he was like a negotiator. He was trying to get me to stop what I was going to do. He's like, we don't want you to do this. And he goes, we can make your life better. And this is the crazy thing. I told him, I said, hey, I don't have time to talk. I got to go through this appointment. Then we'll talk, right? The appointment went really good. The doctor was thorough, and I'm walking out of the room behind the doctor, and this ET says, look, Nate, things are going better for you now. If you just give us what we want, I can make your life a lot better, because we've made your life miserable. We've done all these things to you, but if you work for us, we'll make it better. And I started to ask this guy questions. He told me that they had a program running where all of these new age influencers have been MILABs and have been abducted and are being mind controlled. And they're out there putting the information out that's a controlled narrative. I was told that the internet, big tech through the NSA and the CIA were actually controlling and shadow banning certain individuals like myself. And they were promoting other channels of people that were pushing the new age story and some of this elaborate contact scenario type things. And so I started to get the full picture. It matched what my friend had seen psychically, that this whole thing was a program. It's a deception. It's a false awakening. You have a real awakening going on, but this is the false version of it, because there's two groups that have to awaken. There's the global population, but then there's a percentage of starseeds, people with extraterrestrial souls. They're comprised of 1/3 of the population. They are in engineered lifetimes, but there's a specific portion of them that are supposed to wake up, and they're supposed to be for social engineering and for other purposes, basically to fight the negative ET agenda on various fronts. And these people are also used politically as well. There's a big social engineering program going on, but there's two sides to it. You have the negative side, and you have the good side, and it's a constant war. It's an alien proxy war over the fate of humanity. So he tells me all this stuff, and he's trying to cut a deal. And And this went on for 10 hours, and I drugged this whole thing out. And at the end, he basically said, get the F out of my face, because I got into his head and I was messing with him. I had been messed with by these ETs for years. I knew their techniques. At this point, I was awake and aware that all this had been, perpetrated on me. Everything was done to me that way. And this was my time to get even, because now I've got these people to talk to, and I'm going to give them a piece of my mind and give the same mind control and same nonsense that they did to me. I'm going to give it right back to them. So I turned him down. I said, I feel sorry for you, because you have absolutely nothing to negotiate with. You've destroyed my life. You destroyed my health. You've kept me a prisoner on this planet. You've hurt my friends. You've turned this world into a horror. I mean, it's a horror show in a hellhole. I said, I don't want anything to do with you. And he said something to me which was weird. Which is what he said is that he goes, I didn't think you'd accept my offer anyway. You never did in the past. And that was really the last thing he said to me, which led me to understand that I had been here, and this has been going on. This has happened before, and it has been going on for a very, very long time. And that's a kind of a topic that we can get into maybe in the future. You can find it on my channel. I talk about it, but it has to do with coming here, volunteering to come here to be an agent of change in an alien proxy war. And there's a whole system that surrounds this. So anyway, that happened. And then I think it was that night, or was the next day. I think it was that night. I actually tried to burn these cords off. Now, my friend was telling me, you got to turn to God. You got to look, you have to turn to God in order to get out of this. I knew that was right. That's what I did. And I understood that I had to channel source energy. And I hadn't done that before. So that's what I tried to do. I burnt some of the cords off. Now they started to reattach themselves. I could actually see this. What I was seeing it was kind of a translucent sort of silhouette of like my form, my energy body, standing upright in a void, and then completely covered in silver cords. I mean, every square inch of my body had a silver cord draping off of me and going in all directions into an abyss. And that's what I saw. There was a silver life force cord that was in the middle between my shoulders. And that was a big one. I would say, if I was to give you the size, it was 6 or 7 inches across. The smaller ones were maybe 3/4 to an inch thick, and it looked like ropes, like silver, silver ropes just kind of stuck to me and then hanging off. James Rink said that there's also a silver cord that goes right in the back of your head, which was also depicted in the Matrix movies after something that, I don't know if it was super soldier disclosure that influenced that or what, but I didn't see that silver cord just simply because I didn't look. So the following day, and as I started to separate the cords, now keep in mind, I'm being attacked by Draco reptilians. I had these entities or these ETs in my mind threatening to kill me. They kept saying, you're going to die, in these horrific sounding, nasty voices, like something you'd hear out of a horror movie. And I'm arguing with these individuals in my head. They were inflicting pain on me. They were causing pain in my ankle. At one point, and this is really, really twisted, I had a sensation of a needle going through my genitalia. And I was shown an image of myself laying in this room, in this big room with Dracos and people in lab coats and stuff. It was a military base. It was identified as White Sands, which I'll explain in a moment. So they were inflicting pain on a clone altar. This was a clone of me that was taken when I was 6 during my abduction. They're using this. They had a silver cord, of a life force cord. It was attached to me, to this clone. This was being used to prevent me from contacting my higher self or having any type of interaction with my higher self. And it was being used to make me sick and to mind control me. That's what it was, like a high-tech voodoo doll type of scenario. And I'm not the only one. I've actually heard a little bit of people who do energy work and energy clearings on people. And one person mentioned that they had seen somebody in a room like this. They thought it was just on the astral. It wasn't real, but it was real, but it wasn't actually happening physically, is what I meant. So anyway, I started to burn these cords the following day after I did a couple. and I was being threatened and all that. And and I was being hurt. I spent probably a good hour or two working on this, and my higher self was actually there to coach me. And after I burnt a few cords off the night before, I could hear my higher self. So now I'm having a telepathic conversation with another part of myself that sounds like another inner voice that I can interact and have a conversation with. And this side of me is telling me you're going to have to burn these cords in a sequence. You have to get rid of the smaller ones first, but you're going to have to leave the life force cord last because they kept reattaching. But once you get rid of enough cords, you're going to get to a point where the AI computer, this transdimensional supercomputer that they're using, that interfaces with with the consciousness, is going to slow down, and it's not going to be able to attach these so fast. So you actually get a break. Eventually, I got all the cords off with the life force cord, and at that point, my higher self said, "You've got a little bit of time. You can take a break if you want, but I want you to get right on this immediately. You've got to break the life force cord." I channeled as much source energy in it as I possibly could. I mean, this was literally, I felt like I was a circuit. There was a lot of power coming in, and I could feel it all through my body. And my mind's eye opened up during this whole period, and I could see this. So I was looking out the rear of my head at this life force cord, and I finally burned it because what I had to do, I had to burn everything at once. The smaller cords, they disintegrated first, and then the intermediate size ones, they started to break. I had a big one, smaller than a life force cord, but maybe 3 or 4 inches in circumference, that was on my chest. That was causing the heart problems. So I got to the point where I completely removed the life force cord. It looked like a coax cable. It was kind of arched like this. It didn't have that little, like a needle thing in the center like you'd have on a coax, but it had that general shape, but it was rather smooth and silver looking. When it popped off of me, there was a shower of kind of sparky energy, and I heard this fizzle, at which point I instantly heard this voice. I don't remember if it was male or female. I think it was female. And it said, it says, "Nathan, you just did a very bad thing." And I'm all full of myself at this point. I'm like, well, F you, it's like, you're not going to control me anymore. And then all hell broke loose. I actually got attacked by the super soldiers that a friend of mine was, describing. I don't remember how this went, but prior to breaking those cords, and I'm kind of skipping around because it's so hard to remember this shit in order. But in between the first time that I tried to remove the cords the night before and that next day, I had this interaction with the super soldier that came through. He described himself as a corporal from White Sands, New Mexico. He explained to me that I was in a military program, essentially, that I'd been kidnapped or hijacked, my soul and so forth. He said that they wished that they could have used me in their, like these military type programs. He didn't specify what they were. I didn't even know that I was in a super soldier or any SSP or any of this stuff that they used me for until after I talked to James Rink and some more information started coming out. He made it sound like, because he said, "I wish we could have used you in these, but you were very dangerous and uncontrollable." And I'm thinking to myself, like, whoa. And I said, and here's some of the crazy things. I said, "Why did you do this to me?" And he says, "To protect the continuity of the government." And I'm like, "What government are you talking about?" I said, "This doesn't protect the continuity of a government. This doesn't protect the United States of America." I said, "You're a threat to everyone on this planet for what you're doing." I said, "Do you know who you work for?" He goes, "I know exactly who I work for." So I had this back and forth with this guy. I mean, he knew my whole life story. He knew things that I did in my past, the things that I was doing now that I don't talk about. He was throwing it in my face. Suddenly I got this image of this house, and it was a brand new house in a development. And I could see that it was in, Nevada, possibly someplace, or New Mexico. It had these mountains. It was just, it was all dry dirt. And I said, "What is that?" He says, "That's my house." He says, "It's nice, isn't it?" I'm like, "Yeah." "Why are you showing me your house?" He said, "Because I want you to see what you get for serving the system. And I want you to remember what you get when you don't serve the system, which is nothing, more or less." So he was telling me, and he says, "Your life has been destroyed by us because you didn't listen to us." it came out, later through my subconscious that, I was in these programs, and my higher self had broken through the programming and the AI and had broke my alters out of the mind control where they turned on people. So if you can imagine, maybe you're doing an operation, you got super soldiers deployed, and one of them just starts killing the other super soldiers or kills their superior officer, something like that. I don't know what it is. I just know that that's what happened. I don't have the recollection of it. And it first came in this situation with this super soldier. So anyway, all this is going on. And he actually refers to me as my ET name, which is Yaya. And that's my female Hajian name. He actually had that and the last name, which shocked me. He says, I know everything about you. And he says, but look, he says, what I want you to do, he goes, I'll tell you more about us and what we're doing with you and yourself, but I need to ask you some questions first. And he says, all I ask of you. And I said, okay, fine. He says, who are you? And why are you here? And that's what he said. And I wasn't going to give much information up. At this point, I really didn't think that I could even answer this question. Honestly, I didn't know. I was still piecing it together. And I just said, I'm a Hajian woman who cares. And that's it. And I said, source is my AI, because he admitted to being, I said, are you infested with AI? And he goes, yes, I'm tied into a supercomputer. And I talked to other Dracos earlier, and the few days before that, where all this was going on, when they were communicating with me as they were torturing me, and then I had people coming through trying to be nice to me. They were playing both sides of the coin, like you'd be interrogated by the police. You have a good cop and and then you have the cop that wants to hang you. So anyway, it got to that point, and then after I separated the cords, that's when they really started to attack. And that's when I could see I was communicating with a guy that was in some kind of, he was up at a desk. He was in some kind of a table or sitting in some kind of chair. I don't know if it was a Montauk chair or whatever the hell it was, but I asked him, I was like, how do you interface with a computer? I said, you sit in a Montauk chair or something. And he says, no, it's wireless. We interface through consciousness. It was him and 3 other people in this room. And, they were basically threatening me. We're going to kill you and stuff. Now, this is before I broke the cords, by the way. I'm jumping around. He said, he says, look, and this is after when he was asking me the questions. He explained to me, he says, you were like an empty shell of armor. We wish we could have used you for, the various programs that we have, but you've turned out to be dangerous and unpredictable. And he says, Nathan, you're a very deceptive, manipulative, and very dangerous extraterrestrial. And he says, I'm sorry, but you don't deserve to live. And that's what he said. He was a very final type of way of saying it, like this was it. And he says, you've got 14 days, and then we're going to terminate your clone, which is going to kill you through a heart attack. And I'm like, well, kind of cool. I mean, I get to go home. This is the end of the nightmare. He says, we're sending you back where you come from, and that's it. And don't ever come back here. And he was saying, why did you come here to meddle in our affairs? We're not going to allow that. And this is when I was starting to learn more about myself. And at this point, because this is the first time I'm hearing this shit. And so at that point, I then went and I separated the cords. But before I did, I said, well, how come I have 14 days? And he says, it's because we have a treaty with your race. We have to wait 14 days before we terminate you. And he says, as far as I'm concerned, we should do it right now. And he says, in fact, I'm going to contact my superior officer and ask if we can do it now, but I don't think they're going to allow it because of the treaty. At which point, I went and I separated the cords. Then I started getting attacked. Well, at one point, and this is the craziest thing, I got hit with directed energy, and I'm sitting here at this desk right here having this interaction with these super soldiers, and in this room that they're in, that I can see it, like it's kind of cloudy, but I can see them. I can see silhouettes. They're talking to me. I know what I'm looking at through my mind's eye. It just isn't clear. And I'm sitting there, and we're going back and forth threats, and I'm like just telling them to shove it and different things. And if I could have recorded this somehow, it would have been an epic discussion that lasted a couple of days, because it would be not only funny, but very dark and very disgusting at the same time because of the things that I had said. And I did everything I could to, to fully disrespect them. So I started feeling like really sick, and what I was feeling was, it was something that had been described to me by a friend who I'd spoken about earlier, was being attacked by these super soldiers. He said when he gets hit by directed energy from a satellite, it's this intense magnetic field, and it feels like you're fading out. You get really nauseous and weak, and it literally feels like your mind, and actually it is, your mind blanks out. You can't think while it's hitting you, and it started to build up quickly with intensity. And he says it looks like it almost heats the air, and I'm looking around, and it was either my eyes were going in and out of focus, or there was some kind of distortion that I was seeing. Not heat coming off the pavement, but everything was kind of blurry and would go in and out a bit and kind of wavy. And just like the air was being heated, but it wasn't being heated. And I felt really sick. And I said, what is that? And he was in mid-sentence reading the riot act to me, how they're going to do this and they're going to kill me and everything else. And I'm finished and I'm no good. And I said, what is that? And he says, that's directed energy. How do you like it? What that told me is that this guy from the computer that he was interfacing with could target me from a satellite. That's how advanced this is. To my surprise, my higher self sprung into action. And in my mind's eye, I saw two arms come up like this and literally go like that from left to right. She pushed the energy right out of me and put it into a safe space next to me. So they were targeting an area right next to me where my arm is right now. And it did nothing. And then I felt this force like pushing the energy up and out my head. And it was a nauseating feeling. If you've ever been exposed to a very intense magnetic field, that's what it was, because that's exactly what they were doing. And the energy was just pushed out through my head and shoulders, and I felt instantly better. And I hear this super soldier stutter and stammer and say, he's like 50, 60, 70, 80. He's like, you just deflected 80% of that energy. And I said, yeah. I said, like, it wasn't that, because here's the funny thing. When he said, how do you like it? I said, not bad, just being a smart ass, because I was doing everything I can to say F you. Well, once I pushed this out, they were shocked. And that's when instantly, as soon as that happened, and he started to stutter and say, nah, I can't believe you did that. And all of a sudden, this orb that I could see in my mind's eye flies out from around me. And it was about this big, and it was pure white light, and it went straight into this guy's face. And what it did was it completely separated his connection to the computer. His mind's eye was complete whiteout, and he was disoriented from it. That took him out. And then my higher self now was actually, the funny thing was, it was like it would happen. And then as it happened, I knew how to do it. It's like your higher self rides the bicycle through your body, and then you step off of it. Now you know how to ride the bicycle. So automatically I started rapid fire these orbs. One of them came through. Somebody else in the room came in and said, you just took out 3 of my personnel. Please, you need to stop. Now, instead of being threatening and vile and everything else that they were doing to me, now they want to negotiate. So, I'm like, I'm going through this, and it feels normal and natural, believe it or not. It's like the culmination, or like the end result of all the shit that I've been through and experienced. So I was taking it pretty well. So I went upstairs. I think I was eating something out of the refrigerator. I got something to drink, and this person comes back like 5 minutes later and starts to negotiate. We need to just work this out. I'm like, yeah, well, okay. Well, you leave me alone and I'll leave you alone. And then they hit me again. I struck back, I think. And then at that point, that was it. They kind of reneged on their whole promise. And I remember the guy saying to me, like in a really smart tone, he's like, you don't have any intuition. We lied to you. And I said, I knew you lied to me. I said, I just wanted to play along. And from there, it was just nonstop attacks every single day, 20 or so times a day, where they would constantly attack my ankle, because it was already a problem and I could barely walk on it at this point. To make a long story short, the next thing that took place is I went through about 4 weeks of these attacks, and then a couple weeks in, I realized, wait a minute, why am I letting this happen? I could attack them. I already did. And they weren't hitting me with, directed energy. I actually wanted them to do that because I wanted to see if I could deflect it back to the operator. And whenever I would get hit with any attachments to the AI system, instead of just sending energy back to the AI system, which isn't going to work very well, I would send it to the operator. Whoever was responsible for putting me into the computer system, whoever was responsible for it was going to get hit. And I was able to use that to stop the attacks. But of course, they've started back up again recently, but they're not as bad as they were. They're more sneaky. They affect my speech. I go to do an interview like this. I have, cognitive issues and things like that. I have to keep cleaning myself, but that's what it's been. So for the sake of time, that's mostly what happened. And since then, I've only had a couple of interactions with them. I haven't heard from these super soldiers. I've had a couple reptilians come and ask me what I'm going to do when I die and stuff like that, just asking weird things. And then I would, threaten them, and then they would leave. But for the most part, that's the situation. And as bizarre as it sounds, that's what happened. Do you have anything you want to ask? Or
The biggest question I want to ask is, what do you do if you believe you are involved in a MILAB program?
That's a very good question. What I did was go public. Trying to contact people, unless you've got a lot of money, it's hard to get help. I mean, even if you got money, it's hard to get help because I contacted a hypnotherapist who works for MUFON, who works with him and does hypnotic regressional MILABs. And I was all ready to talk to her and everything, and then she stopped communicating with me, and she wouldn't respond. I had her phone number. I was calling her. She sent me her phone number, and then that was it. It was just something happened. She got spooked. I don't know what. Probably psychic interference is what I go through. The only thing that I could really, really say is, you'd have to go public. You'd have to start telling your story. If you can't do that, you're going to be isolated. And that's what I had to do. And through doing that, I was able to find help. And I spent years doing crazy posts under, the Leak Project videos about planetary consciousness simulations and ET contact and social engineering. And of course, that never got me anywhere, but it did connect me with a few people that actually became friends with me that helped me. So one person in particular, but and that's the woman who I was describing, who had, the psychic information, who has kind of helped me through this whole thing. Yeah, I don't have an answer. You got to go public and you got to seek people out, because it's very easy to ignore an email. You can contact James Rink. I couldn't get him to give me the time of day. That was the impression I got. But I sent him, the video of Rex Bear and him, freaking out over that whole experience. And that was what actually, I think, persuaded him to, to help me, because he probably gets a lot of these emails. And who do you believe and who do you help? That's the question. How much time and resources do you have?
Absolutely.
So I just got lucky that they did that to me, so that I had something to show people. Unfortunately, for the first couple of years that I had that incident, nobody would talk to me. But it wasn't until I started to sound like everybody else that I started to get help. And that's because I figured out what was going on. So anyway, do you have any other things you want to ask? I'd be happy.
Do you have any advice for anybody out there that's dealing with this like you are?
Yeah, I do. You need to find other people like yourself, and you need to confide in them, and you need to open up, and you can't hide the last thing you want to do is keep things to yourself. I've had to talk about things that I thought I'd never talk about. I've had to talk about being sexually abused by ETs. I've had to talk about shutting my testicles down. And actually, when I've got to go on testosterone replacement therapy, I was made very sick because of that. And that's one of the things that they do to the males when they really want to suppress their activity, is they affect them hormonally. James Rink was having problems with that too. My other friend, who helped me for about a year, he was the guy who was being attacked. They did the same thing to him. It seems to be a common thing that they do to people. You just need to put your guard down, and you need to seek help, and you can't be ashamed of what's happened to you. that's the main thing that I would say to everybody. There's no reason to be ashamed. You can't necessarily tell maybe your spouse. I mean, I have problems with that. I can't really talk to her about this stuff because of all the problems that it's caused. She associates it all with being in my head and being something wrong with me, but she doesn't understand why there's all these other people involved and that I'm not the only one. So she just kind of leaves it at that. And it's just a wound in our relationship. But yeah, you gotta be willing to open up and not be ashamed of yourself. I mean, for a guy to say, I've been raped by ETs and I've had my testicles shut down because of them. That isn't something that's easy to say. But when your soul's on the line and your life has been destroyed, you don't have anything else to lose. And I'd recommend anybody in the situation to get help. And it's going to be hard, but you're going to have to put your guard down and look for the people who are willing to do it. They're out there. They're hard to find. But if you put your face on a video and you're sincere and you open up, hopefully within time, somebody will step in to help you. That's all I can say. And if there's anybody out there that needs counseling or help, you can always contact me. I'm always looking for people to talk to. I can't do energy work on you. I don't have that ability right now, but I can definitely help you get through some of this stuff. And I can't be stretched thin. Obviously, I've got limited time and resources, but I'm willing to talk to people who are really, really out there suffering. And I think what we need to do is we need to network together more and stop being so kind of standoffish. And because this is a very weird community to get involved in, not the super soldier, but the entire paranormal community. It's very, excuse me, it's very, divided, and there's a lot of cliques and people are suspect to one another because there's shills out there and so forth. But you got to find good, legitimate people. One place I found was if you go to Project Avalon, it's not as active as of a community that it used to be. But if people make it active and things will get a lot better there. That's where I went to get help, and that's where it started at. So I mean that's one place you can go. Like I said, you just got to put your guard down.
Absolutely, I agree with you. And with that being said, too, anybody who's having experiences or similar occurrences, feel free to reach out to me. Feel free to reach out to him. All of his contact information is connected below. Very interesting, and it's been awesome to hear your experiences and to share even the dark side of it with us. I really appreciate you doing that.
Thank you for having me on. I look at this as therapy. Everybody who I've done an interview with, there's only just a couple of people, but every time I do an interview, it helps me get over this. It helps me, live with it. And it is therapeutic. And also making, videos are therapeutic. They're very scary and they're very difficult at first. It really took a lot out of me to get to the point where I can openly talk about this stuff. I mean, not really took a lot. It took a lot to get me to this point is what I was trying to say. And it isn't easy because when you try to go public, they have an AI system that, actively monitors you. You're fully monitored. And it was a shock to me to learn that every thought, every emotion that I had throughout my entire life was monitored by a supercomputer. And that thoughts were put into me. I was being manipulated. I didn't mention this, but they actually changed my sexual orientation at some point. It was in my early 30s, right before my son was born. And, that had to do with my ET sexual orientation, which was more of a fluid sexuality because you can remember your past lives. You don't really have, you're basically aware of everyone you've ever been. So, if there isn't really a set sexuality, it's more of a choice with the extraterrestrials versus here because you can't remember who you were because there's a mystery what causes or actually what creates your sexual orientation. It's more about consciousness. It's not a genetic thing. It's a consciousness aspect. So that's why they can't find a gene. But that's one of the things that they did that affected my marriage. It affected my life. It wasn't something that should have happened. It was very destructive. And I've had them do horrific things to me. And I know there's other people out there because I've met them. I've been involved with them. But I know there's a lot more people out there that are sitting out there now and thinking, I can't do what he's doing. I can't put my name and my face out there. All I have to say is please do, because it helps all of us. Not only does it help our credibility, but it helps to expose this, because the more people that come out and sincerely tell a legitimate story, the more we're going to be taken seriously. And it has to be done. And that's because, and I did a video yesterday, which you saw, because you left a comment where I said that the reason why we're waking up to this is because the positive extraterrestrials that are trying to liberate the human race from the spiritual prison that we're in are waking us up for the purpose of social engineering. And on the other end of it, you have the sinister reptilian groups and all of that are running this whole thing, and they're trying to muddy this disclosure by putting channelers and stuff in there, and just kind of, distorting the picture, and controlled, MILAB victims who take ride on spacecraft, and they have these elaborate stories. They're injecting that into our disclosure, and they're making it more and more difficult. And it's I mean, things are getting to the point where eventually, if it turns into a new age circus, we're going to be discredited. That's what I'm worried about. But we really need to stick together. And I'm thankful that they have super soldier conferences, SSP stuff, but there needs to be more than that. And really, people need to put their guard down and start networking together to help each other, because there's no place you can go. You can't go to a therapist for this.
Absolutely.
Unless you want to wind up in a bad situation where they say that you're mentally, unfit or whatever, because they're not going to look at this and say that this is really happening. It's a mental illness is what they'll say it is. And honestly, I wish it was, because it wouldn't involve my soul. And that's the worst aspect of this. I just want to finish with this and just say one thing. For those out there who have had these experiences, and anybody who's been abducted, the ETs have hijacked your soul, and they're going to use you in other lifetimes. You're going to be either trapped here. Actually, what it is for a lot of us is they'll continuously use us lifetime after lifetime. If you've come in here from someplace else and you've been stuck in this, you're here until somebody rescues you and somebody gets you out, or you get yourself out somehow. And that's the crime here that's actually taking place. There's soul harvesting. They control the human afterlife, and they don't allow us to be free. And when you come here to help, like I have, sometimes you get sucked up into the system, and you become a victim of it. And what they're doing is they're using the people that are coming here from other worlds who are here to help. And I wanted to mention one last thing too. In these super soldier programs, and I got this from James Rink, and this was also came from my higher self too afterward. Actually, no, some of these concepts came from him, but then the information came from my higher self. The reason I was hijacked in the first place is that my soul is different from a lot of people. There's an angelic aspect to it, and that's what they look for. That makes the ultimate weapon, the ultimate super soldier. If you can get someone that is advanced in that way, and how you get advanced in that way is by serving the will of the will of the collective consciousness, more or less. By serving the good. Because let me explain this a little bit more. I'm sort of having some cognitive issues here.
Do you mean the source?
Yeah, no, what I was going to explain is this is what I found out about myself. In my extraterrestrial life, I was created essentially to go into worlds like this and to be an agent of change. It was something that there was sort of a conscious choice as well, but it's something that I did. It's something I do as a profession. That's what I learned about myself through all these experiences. And I've been coming here since almost the beginning of, humanity, which is about 1.9 million years with this latest form of humanity. And forward. And for about the last million years, we've been in an alien, there's this struggle between the two sides. One wants to enslave humanity. Well, they already have, but they want to get rid of humanity and replace it, and then use the souls that were here in slavery elsewhere, and then the other side wants this to be a fledgling race that they elevate, and they they actually nurture, and then that becomes a member of the rest of the group of races or civilizations that are out there. This was a fledgling race project originally that was kind of hijacked, from what I understand. I have a vague understanding of things. I don't like to use other people's material. I like to just stick with what I know. So, that's how I do it, because I feel secure that way.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I've been coming here for a long time, and that's why they're actually doing this. There's an alien proxy war, and there's souls coming in here for the specific purpose to turn this around. One of the main reason I came here was to attack underground military bases. After you die, what it is the way it was explained to me through my higher self is that when I die, I'm going to be combining with other people who also have passed on, and they're going to raid these bases. It sounds insane. I don't know what's going to happen until I do die, and then I'll find out for certain. And I just want to put a disclaimer on all of this and say that you never know what's the truth, no matter how far you go down the rabbit hole. And what I mean by that is that, I look at all of this and I have to believe what I've experienced, but I can only go 90% on it. I have to leave 10% there as a question mark, because all of this could be the most elaborate deception or mind control program that you could possibly imagine. This could be like the next frontier for me before, I get like a moment where, a new truth comes out and I realize that I've been had again. So ETs are very deceptive. You cannot trust them. I don't trust anything that's channeled. I don't trust anything that comes from them. So, if you get to that point, maybe this is where they put you. They put you in this thing where they tell you, okay, you have this angelic soul and you're here to do this. And they just give you another line of complete falsehoods. I don't know. I just know what I've been experiencing. I've had source consciousness experiences, which I could talk about for hours. But we don't have the time for that tonight. But it's just that, I don't know. I just want everybody to know that this may not be true. I believe it to be true because I have to. I've experienced it. But it's just they can augment, reality to a point where they can literally get you to believe anything. So that's what I want to just leave everybody with. And I have to live with that every day because, I don't know. I'm not 100% certain about what's going to happen. I just know that lately things have changed dramatically, and I'm not in the situation I was before. I'm not getting lied to anymore. I'm getting accurate information. A lot of it I don't talk about. I'm getting help in my life. I have this second inner voice that I can communicate with and get some information from. It acts like a mentor to get me through my lifetime. It's all positive compared to being all negative. So I just kind of have to go with what I'm experiencing now and look at it as truth, because it's been a positive change, where before it was just total chaos. I was mind controlled. I justified the abuse because they lied to me, and I didn't want to believe that I was under siege, and I was like I was trapped, and I was dealing with negative extraterrestrials because they play these mind games with you. So I want to leave everybody with that. And I just, I hope there's some hope for this world, and I hope to be part of it. But I won't know until this life ends, for sure. And I think that's the problem we all have. We don't know what's going to happen when we die. Do we get
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's the big question everybody's asking. We all actually get to find out.
Yeah, nobody's immune. Nobody gets off the planet alive, as they say.
Thank you very much. It's been a really awesome interview. I appreciate it. I'm sure we'll have you back on again someday.
Yeah, and hopefully the aliens will leave me alone so I can talk properly. There's a lot of interference that takes place before these interviews when I do them. So lately it's gotten worse. I just wish I could be like other people and just have a great day and sit down and talk. But it's not in the cards, as they say. They don't want me talking.
Thank you for being on. We appreciate all the information you dropped upon us, and can't wait to see you again back at Lost to the Rabbit Hole. Have a great night, everyone.
Take care. Thank you.